darkness, truths unravel. Welcome to Dark Room Narratives, where every story leaves a shadow.
Welcome, adventurers! What if the end is not evil, but simply home? Prepare for the sands of time to run out. Are you ready?
The Cairo morning greeted Terra's and Lina with a scorching sun and the hum of an endless city. They stood on their balcony, watching the pyramids, emerging from the sandy haze on the horizon, begin to shimmer in the air. After the events on the Isle of Skye and the acquisition of the Ring of Mists, their path was clearly defined. Egypt, the sands of Giza, and the next artifact, the Hourglass of Eternity. In their backpack, among other gear, there were now 5 artifacts. The Gromovitsia, the Eye of the Eternal Storm, the Blade of the Phantom Forest, the Ring of Mists, and a pair of amulets. Each pulsed with its own unique energy, creating a strange, almost organic hum within the container. Lina touched her amulet on her neck, feeling its steady beat resonate with her own heart. Terra's looked east, his face, though weary, expressed deep resolve. He felt the mission changing them, transforming them into something more than mere adventurers. With each acquired artifact, the power of their lineage became more palpable, sometimes even frightening. He recalled Lina's latest visions, where her consciousness once again plunged into the memory of their ancestors, revealing horrifying fragments of information about the entity. She saw not just a destructive force, but something far older and more complex. Primordial chaos, which sought not merely to destroy, but to return the world to its original, formless state. This knowledge was oppressive, and he saw how it weighed heavily on her shoulders. Lina closed her eyes, trying to ward off the latest nightmares. After Scotland, the entity's influence on their psyche became more subtle. She felt chaos trying to penetrate her mind through dreams, creating illusions that played on her fears. Fear of losing Terra's, fear of failing the mission, fear of becoming something other than herself. This was a new, more personal form of attack. She knew that the Hourglass of Eternity, an artifact capable of freezing time for the entity, was crucial. But prophecy warned. The artifact was guarded by sand demons and dangerous illusions that could bury them alive under a layer of sand. They decided to act cautiously, posing as ordinary tourists visiting the Giza pyramids. The crowds of people, the hum of voices, the flashes of cameras, all of it created an illusion of safety. But Terra's and Lina felt something sinister beneath the surface. They waited until nightfall, when the tourist buses had departed and the desert plunged into an eerie silence, broken only by the whistling wind and the distant howling of jackals. The night air was cold, and the sand crunched underfoot. They were dressed in light, but durable modern tactical clothing that allowed them to blend into the night landscape. Guided by the Ring of Mists, which now glowed with a clear silvery light, they moved towards the base of the Great Pyramid. The artifact indicated a small, barely noticeable opening hidden behind a pile of stones and sand, which was undoubtedly not part of official archaeological excavations. The air at the entrance was cold, despite the daytime heat. This was not just an entrance to a tomb, but a portal to a place where time and reality obeyed other rules. The amulets around their necks pulsed more intensely, warning of the proximity of a powerful energy node. Upon entering, they found themselves in a narrow, dusty tunnel. The air was stale, saturated with the smell of ancient dust and forgotten secrets. The ring of mists in Lina's hand continued to glow, casting long, bizarre shadows on the walls. The tunnel led them deeper, and soon they heard a low, drawn-out sound, like the buzzing of millions of insects, but with a metallic tinge. Terras recalled tales of sand demons, called Habib al-Riml, lovers of the sand, creatures that emerged from the desert and could consume life. This was their new trial. The narrow, dusty tunnel leading deep into the Great Pyramid seemed like a living maw. The air was heavy and stifling, permeated with the smell of ancient dust and something elusive, rotten. The ring of mists on Lina's hand glowed with a faint silvery light, casting long, bizarre shadows on the walls. Terras and Lina walked cautiously, each step seeming an act of courage, for from the depths of the tunnel came a low, drawn-out sound, like the buzzing of millions of metallic insects. These were the Habib al-Riml, lovers of the sand, shadow demons Terras had mentioned earlier. They were not merely insects, but a manifestation of the entity, connected to the sands and ancient Egyptian curses. Lina felt the amulet around her neck pulse frantically, and Lina's mind began to cloud. This time, the influence of the Habib al-Riml was different. They didn't create illusions like the Tengu, but tried to instill a sense of inevitable burial alive, a panicked fear of confined spaces, and an endless quantity engulfing you. She saw the sand beneath her feet seemingly transform into a living mass, eager to swallow her. Terras, noticing her state, squeezed her hand tightly. "It's just illusions, Lina. Focus," he shouted, his voice sounding like an anchor in this whirlpool of fear. The blade of the phantom forest in his backpack vibrated, as if preparing for action. Eventually, the tunnel widened, opening into a vast, circular chamber carved directly into the rock. In the center stood a stone pedestal, and upon it, enveloped in a thin layer of sand, lay the mysterious Hourglass of Eternity. It was made of black stone, and its bulbs, instead of ordinary sand, contained golden, shimmering grains that flowed from one bulb to another, defying gravity. But the chamber was not empty. From all corners, from cracks in walls, and even from beneath the sand, as soon as they stepped into the hall, thousands of Habib al-Riml began to crawl out, enormous scarabs with carapaces as black as night and glowing red eyes. Their buzzing became deafening, and the air filled with the smell of ancient decay. Terras drew the blade of the phantom forest. "It's them," he exclaimed, realizing that these were not just guardians, but another aspect of the entity connected to this artifact. Thousands of Habib al-Riml surged towards them, their buzzing becoming deafening, and the air filled with the smell of decay. Lina grabbed the eye of the eternal storm, and it flared blue, creating a faint protective field that repelled some scarabs. The Gromovitsia, in her backpack, hummed faintly, as if warning of the growing danger. This was not just an attack, but an attempt to bury them alive under a layer of insects, under the control of demonic forces. Lina, despite the headache and rising panic, remembered the prophecy that their ancestor Pharaoh had left in a vision. This artifact is not for control, but for stopping. Do not try to manipulate that which seeks to consume you, or your fate will be mine. She knew that the Hourglass of Eternity was supposed to freeze time for the entity, which made it critically important for their mission. She also understood that for its activation, according to prophecy, her blood was needed. This was their only chance to stop this endless onslaught. The scarabs were fast and relentless. They crawled up the walls, fell from the ceiling, filling every inch of the chamber. Terras swung the blade of the phantom forest. Each strike of the blade against the Habib al-Riml shadows caused them to disintegrate into black dust, but there were too many of them. Lina tried to reach the pedestal, but the scarabs blocked her path, their chitinous carapaces slippery and cold. "We have to get to the hourglass," she shouted to Terras, realizing that time was running out. Her amulet pulsed wildly, and the blood on her hand, which had been cut earlier, seemed to burn. She took a step forward, her gaze fixed on the hourglass of eternity, despite the thousands of insects swarming her. A swarm of Habib al-Riml, shadow scarabs, surrounded Lina and Terras, their buzzing deafening, and their carapaces seemed to shimmer in the dim light. The sand beneath their feet stirred, and more insects crawled out from every crevice, threatening to bury them alive. Lina, her face pale with tension but resolute, stepped towards the pedestal where the hourglass of eternity stood. She felt the amulet around her neck pulsing frantically, and the wound on her palm burned. This was the signal. She had to activate the artifact and do it now. Terras, swinging the blade of the phantom forest, fended off the onslaught, protecting Lina, his strikes precise, but their numbers were too great. Lina drew Terras' knife and, without hesitation, deeply cut her already wounded palm. Blood gushed, bright and warm, and she pressed it to the surface of the hourglass of eternity. The golden grains of sand inside the bulbs began to emit a bright, dazzling light that permeated the chamber. Suddenly, the chamber shook, and a powerful pulse of energy erupted from the hourglass of eternity. Thousands of shadow scarabs that had swarmed them wailed in pain. They did not disintegrate into dust, like the Tengu before, but froze in place as if suspended in time, their glowing red eyes extinguished. The stirring sand suddenly became motionless. Time for the entity in this chamber was frozen. Lina felt the hourglass's energy flow into her, clearing her mind of panic and fatigue. It was an amazing power, the ability to stop time for immaterial threats, rendering them powerless. Terras, freed from the scarabs that had covered him, lowered the blade of the phantom forest. His breathing was heavy, but a smile of relief appeared on his face. "You did it," he gasped, looking at the frozen swarm. The hourglass of eternity in Lina's hands glowed with a soft, golden light, its magical sand flowing slower than ever, almost stopping. New runes, forming an intricate, glowing pattern, began to appear on the surface of the hourglass of eternity. Lina ran her finger over them, and her eyes widened at a new vision, much clearer and more immersive than the previous ones. She saw not just a pharaoh, but the origin of chaos. It was a dark, pulsating mass of energy that existed even before the creation of worlds. It was not evil in the human sense, but an anthropic vacuum, an absolute void that sought to absorb any form, any life, to return the universe to its primordial, formless state. This entity had no goal of destruction. It merely sought to return home, and its home was non-existence. She saw how the first priests, their ancestors, did not create the seals, but discovered them when they first encountered the manifestations of the anthropic vacuum. These were not artifacts, but natural energy nodes that the priests learned to harness, transforming them into a kind of locks on the doors between worlds. Each artifact was a key to one of these locks, and the blood of the lineage was the only thing that could activate them. The pharaoh she had seen before was not a manipulator, but one of the first who tried to understand and control these forces, but he was consumed because his intention was distorted. His soul, like the souls of others who tried to control chaos, became part of its manifestations, doomed to eternal guardianship. The vision ended, leaving Lina trembling. She understood that chaos was not an enemy that could be defeated in direct combat. It was a fundamental force that had always existed, and its goal was to return home. This was knowledge that could break anyone. Terras, she whispered, her voice barely audible. We are not fighting evil. We are fighting the beginning and the end. The Anthropic Vacuum. That's its name. And it wants to return everything to nothingness. Terras paled, his eyes wide with horror. This information was a heavier burden than any battle. Their mission had become much more complex and terrifying. The shock of the newly revealed knowledge about the Anthropic Vacuum, the true name and nature of the entity, was overwhelming. Lina felt her mind struggling, try to comprehend it. This was not merely an evil that could be defeated. It was a primordial force that existed before everything, seeking to return all to non-existence. Terras, his face ashen, simply squeezed her hand in silence. The stillness in the chamber, broken only by their heavy breathing, seemed deafening after the chaotic buzzing of the scarabs. The hourglass of eternity in Lina's hands glowed with a soft golden light, holding the shadow scarabs in a state of eternal stillness. We are fighting something that has no form and no end, Lina whispered, her voice barely audible. The knowledge that their ancestors had not created the seals, but only discovered and utilized natural energy nodes to lock away this primordial force, was a heavy burden. It meant they couldn't destroy it, only temporarily contain it. And the entity, the Anthropic Vacuum, sought to return home to a state of non-existence, consuming all that exists. This was not a desire for evil, but a striving for its primordial form. Terras, recovering, looked at the blade of the phantom forest. It seemed to have grown even darker, absorbing even the meager rays of light penetrating from the surface. They hurried to the chamber's exit. The hourglass of eternity in Lina's hands emitted a constant golden glow, serving as their guide in the dark corridors. Now that the shadow scarabs were frozen, the tunnels seemed empty, but the feeling of an oppressive presence remained. Emerging onto the surface, they were met by the cold air of the night desert. The moon brightly illuminated the majestic pyramids, standing silently under the starry sky, appearing even more mysterious after the horrifying knowledge they had just acquired. They reached their jeep, their hearts still pounding from the ordeal, and their minds refusing to accept the scale of the threat. The drive back to Cairo was calm, but Terras and Lina's thoughts were far from peaceful landscapes. They discussed the new discoveries. If we can't destroy it, then why are we doing this? Terras asked, his voice filled with despair. Lina looked at him. Our ancestors believed it could be contained, that each seal, each artifact, is a way to delay its return, to buy the world time, perhaps to find another way. Her own words sounded unconvincing, but she clung to them like a last hope. The knowledge of the Anthropic Vacuum was not only terrifying, but also extremely draining psychologically, creating a constant sense of futility in their struggle. They spent the next few days in Cairo, trying to rest and process the information they had received. The scorching sun above the city seemed strangely alien to them, and the hum of human voices, empty and meaningless, for they had just learned of a threat that transcended human comprehension. Terras felt his amulet pulse hotly, and the blade of the phantom forest in his backpack sometimes emitted a faint chill. He searched online for information about the Anthropic Vacuum or ancient myths that might describe similar entities, but of course found nothing. The world was not ready for such knowledge. Lina focused on the runes that had appeared on the Hourglass of Eternity after its activation. They were more detailed than the previous ones, pointing to their next destination, Antarctica. This was another extreme location, befitting the scale of their mission. Prophecies stated that there, in an icy cave, awaited the icy heart, a crystal capable of weakening the entity. This sounded promising, for weakening was closer to defeating than merely containing. Antarctica, the continent of eternal ice, seemed an ideal place for such an artifact. This also deepened their understanding of the artifact's diversity and their functions in the battle against chaos. The flight to Antarctica was the longest and most challenging of their journey. Flights across continents and exhausting hours spent waiting in transit airports seemed trivial compared to the realization that they were heading to the coldest and most desolate place on the planet. Lina sat by the window, watching the landscapes change from green fields to endless glaciers. She felt the energy of the hourglass of eternity, which she held in a special container, resonating with Antarctica's cold. The knowledge of the anthropic vacuum lay as a heavy burden on her soul, but the mention of the icy heart, which was supposed to weaken the entity, gave her new, fragile hope. Terras slept, his face serene, but even in his sleep, he clutched the blade of the phantom forest tightly. After discovering the true nature of the entity, their sleep had become restless, filled with nightmares where the anthropic vacuum tried to penetrate their dreams, creating illusions of non-existence. They both felt the mission not only sharpening their abilities, but also psychologically exhausting them. The amulets around their necks pulsed constantly, as if creating a protective barrier, but even it couldn't always protect against chaos's influence. Terra's new Antarctica would be their toughest test, not just because of the cold, but because of something else lurking beneath the ice. Landing at the Antarctic base was a shock to their senses. The biting cold penetrated their clothes, the wind howled like a spirit, and endless icy expanses stretched to the horizon, merging with the white sky. The base was small, stark, and functional, inhabited by scientists and researchers who seemed completely detached from the outside world and its problems. Terras and Lina were dressed in modern, high-tech winter clothing, which, however, barely protected them from the piercing cold. They rented a special all-terrain vehicle and hired an experienced polar guide named Sven, a man with a weathered face and eyes that had seen much ice and snow. Sven, hearing they were looking for a lost cave, merely snorted skeptically, but agreed when Terras showed him an old, faded map they had found in the archives. The map, which had appeared on the Hourglass of Eternity after its activation, pointed to a specific location deep within the glacier, an isolated icy cave, uncharted on any modern maps. The runes on the Hourglass of Eternity flickered with a golden light, indicating the way, and Lina felt the artifact's energy resonating with Antarctica's energy. She knew this place was not just a cave, but an ancient energy node where the icy heart was located. The journey across the glaciers was exhausting. The all-terrain vehicle slowly overcame snowdrifts, and the endless white expanses seemed to have no end. The frost was so intense that the air turned into icy needles that scratched their skin. Sven, an experienced polar explorer, told them about strange anomalies in the ice, lost expeditions, strange sounds emanating from beneath the ice, blue lights appearing without reason. Terras and Lina listened, understanding that each such story might contain another thread to the truth about the entity. The blade of the phantom forest in Terra's backpack vibrated faintly, as if sensing the proximity of something unusual. On the third day of the journey, when they had almost despaired, the Hourglass of Eternity in Lina's hands began to pulse intensely, and its golden light grew brighter. Sven stopped the all-terrain vehicle. Before them, amidst the endless ice, a gigantic crevice opened up. A faint blue glow emanated from its depths, and the air was filled with a piercing cold that was not natural. This was an icy cave, its entrance hidden for centuries. Sven paled. This isn't natural. No one knew about this place, he whispered, his voice trembling. He refused to go further, his face filled with primal terror. Teras and Lina exchanged glances. They knew they had reached their destination. A gigantic crevice in the glacier, emanating an eerie blue glow, was the entrance to the icy cave. Sven, their polar guide, refused to go further, his face contorted by a primal terror that stemmed not so much from the cold as from the place's very presence. Teras and Lina exchanged glances. They understood that from here on, they would have to go alone. They put on their warmest clothes, which were meant to be protection from the biting cold, but this time, their true protection was the artifacts. The Hourglass of Eternity in Lina's hands pulsed with a bright golden light, indicating the way, and the blade of the phantom forest in Tara's hand emitted a faint, cold glint, ready for action. They stepped into the crevice, and the air immediately became even colder. The darkness was almost absolute. Only a faint blue glow from deep within the cave illuminated the icy walls, which shimmered like precious gems. The cave was vast, its vaults lost in the darkness, and the floor was slick with ice. With each step, they felt the cold penetrate every layer of their clothing, reaching their bones. But it wasn't just cold. It was an active, aggressive energy emanating from the ice itself. Ice shadows, Lina whispered, her breath turning to vapor. She felt these shadows trying to penetrate her mind, instilling a sense of hopelessness and eternal freezing, playing on her deepest fears. From the depths of the cave, figures began to emerge, translucent, bizarre shadows, forged from ice and snow. They moved silently, their outlines blurred, and their eyes glowed with a blue light that radiated an eerie cold. These were the ice shadows the prophecy had warned of. They didn't just attack, they tried to freeze them alive, turning them into part of the ice. The amulets around Tara's and Lina's necks pulsed frantically, but even their warmth barely resisted this all-consuming frost. Tara's drew the blade of the phantom forest. Each strike of the blade against the ice shadows shattered them into icy fragments, but they immediately reformed, as if forged from the very gloom. Lina held the Hourglass of Eternity tightly, which emitted a golden glow. She knew that this artifact could freeze time for the entity, but could it stop these ice shadows that seemed to be part of the ice itself? Her mind struggled with a growing sense of helplessness. She remembered the vision of the Anthropic Vacuum, an entity that sought non-existence. These ice shadows were its manifestation, a way to consume all life, turning it into a frozen, motionless void. This was its home, and they were uninvited guests here. They moved further, and the ice shadows grew denser. They felt the cold penetrate their lungs, making breathing painful. Around them, strange, barely visible patterns appeared on the ice. Intricate, blue lines intertwining to form complex designs. These were ancient runes, engraved on the cave's surface, which seemed to hold some power. Terrace felt the amulet around his neck pulse hotly, and he looked at Lina. "We have to find it. The icy heart. It must be close." Suddenly, the cave widened, opening into a vast chamber where an icy altar stood. It was carved from pure ice, and in its center, shrouded in a thin, icy mist, lay a huge, glistening crystal, the icy heart. It radiated a piercing, yet strangely alluring blue glow. Thousands of ice shadows rushed towards them, their eyes burning blue, trying to prevent them from reaching the artifact. The blade of the phantom forest in Terra's hands flared with a dark light, repelling the nearest attackers. But Lina knew their battle was yet to come. Ice shadows, forged from ice and gloom, surged towards Terra's and Lina, trying to prevent them from reaching the icy heart. The cave filled with a piercing cold that felt like physical pain, and their faces began to grow numb. Terra's swung the blade of the phantom forest, its dark glint shattering the icy guardians into thousands of fragments. But they reformed instantly, as if immortal. Lina, holding the Hourglass of Eternity, which emitted a faint golden glow, desperately tried to push through to the icy altar. "We can't hold them back," she shouted to Terra's, her voice lost in the wailing wind and cracking ice. The amulet around Lina's neck pulsed frantically, and her mind struggled against the influence of the Anthropic Vacuum, which tried to instill a feeling of complete despair and hopelessness, threatening to freeze her consciousness. She remembered that the prophecies stated the icy heart was capable of weakening the entity. But how to activate it? She knew that many artifacts required the blood of the lineage. However, she intuitively felt that this crystal required a different approach, as it was linked to weakening rather than blocking or freezing. This was a different aspect of the struggle. She lunged forward, fighting her way through the onslaught of ice shadows. The pain from the cold was unbearable, but Lina ignored it, her gaze fixed on the icy heart. Terra's, seeing her determination, covered her with a blade, his strikes precise, but their effectiveness was diminishing. Finally, Lina reached the icy altar. She placed the Hourglass of Eternity next to the crystal. The golden glow of the hourglass and the blue glow of the icy heart began to interact, creating shimmering streams of energy that filled the chamber. Lina felt a sharp, piercing cold that permeated her to the bone. The crystal, the icy heart, began to pulse stronger, its glow becoming blinding. A powerful pulse of energy erupted from it, spreading throughout the cave. The ice shadows that had swarmed them wailed in pain. They did not disintegrate into dust or freeze in time, but began to weaken, their forms becoming less dense, and their glowing blue eyes dimming. This was weakening. The crystal's energy did not destroy, but exhausted the entity. Lina felt her own strength growing, and the cave's cold receding, replaced by a strange, inner warmth. This was her blood, resonating with the artifact, but the effect was not direct but indirect. Terra's, freed from the weakening ice shadows that had covered him, lowered the blade of the phantom forest. His breathing was heavy, but a smile appeared on his face. "It's working," he gasped, looking at the diminishing shadows. The icy heart in the center of the icy altar glowed with a bright blue, its energy spreading through the cave, suppressing the manifestations of the Anthropic Vacuum. New runes began to appear on the crystal's surface, forming an intricate, glowing pattern. Lina ran her finger over them, and her eyes widened at a new, even deeper vision. She saw that the Anthropic Vacuum was not only non-existence, but also the 0 point of creation from which all energy originated. The ancestors did not merely lock it away, but drew energy from it to create worlds. Over time, these worlds aged and corrupted, and chaos sought to purify them, returning them to their primordial state. The icy heart was created as a filter that could draw off a portion of this primordial energy, weakening the vacuum's pressure while simultaneously feeding the seals and artifacts themselves. The vision showed that the final seal, which could break the cycle of chaos's purification, was at the Earth's core, and an energy trail led to it from the last artifact, the dust of al-Riml. The Anthropic Vacuum had only one vulnerability: the harmony of creation, which could only be restored by a complete cycle of artifact activation. The icy heart, glowing with a piercing blue light, pulsed in the center of the icy altar, its energy spreading through the cave, suppressing the manifestations of the anthropic vacuum. The ice shadows, which moments ago had been formidable guardians, now weakened, their forms blurring, and their glowing blue eyes dimming, as if they were melting. Tara's and Lina stood, watching this spectacle, their faces expressing a mixture of relief and deep understanding. The knowledge Lina had gained about the 0 point of creation and the harmony of creation weighed heavily on their shoulders, but at the same time gave their struggle a clearer purpose. The hourglass of eternity in Lina's hands glowed with a soft golden light, its magical sand barely flowing, pointing to their next destination. The blade of the phantom forest in Tara's hand grew quieter, its dark glint seeming to rest after the battle. They understood that the icy heart did not destroy the shadows, but exhausted them, weakening the anthropic vacuum's connection to this world. This was a new, vital tactic. This was the hope that chaos could not only be contained, but also weakened, preparing the ground for ultimate victory. They hurried to the exit of the icy cave. The frost was still biting, but the ice shadows no longer resisted. Their remnants dissolved into the air like morning mist. The runes on the surface of the icy heart, glowing with a bright blue light, pointed the way. Lina ran her finger over them, and her eyes widened as she saw a clear map. It led to red, sun-scorched rocks, to a place that radiated ancient, primordial energy. This was Australia, Uru Rock, the place where the last artifact, the dust of Uru, awaited, destined to complete the set of artifacts and prepare them for a ritual in the Amazon. Tara's and Lina felt the mission approaching its end. The journey back to the Antarctic base was calm, but their thoughts were far from peaceful landscapes. They discussed new discoveries, the nature of the anthropic vacuum, and the meaning of harmony of creation. If its goal is non-existence, then our goal is life, Tara said, his voice firm, though tired. Lina nodded. And the last artifact must help us restore this harmony. Our ancestors believed in it. The journey back to civilization was long. They reached the nearest airport, their appearance drawing attention. Weary, with eyes that had seen too much, but with an expression of unwavering resolve. In their special container, there were now 6 artifacts, each a key to something larger. The icy heart, lying next to the others, pulsed calmly, its blue glow blending with the golden from the hourglass of eternity and the dark from the blade. They were ready for the final stage of their journey. The flight to Australia was the last in this grand journey. Outside the plane window, icy landscapes gave way to endless ocean expanses and then to red, sun-scorched deserts. Lina looked at the map that had appeared on the icy heart. It was extremely detailed, showing energy lines converging towards the center of Uluru, as if to the Earth's heart. She felt that this would be the place where everything would be decided, the place where all threads of ancient prophecies would converge. This was the final act, the last key to completing their ancestors' task. The flight to Australia was long, but Tara's and Lina's thoughts were focused on the final stage of their mission. They sat by the window, watching as snow-capped peaks gave way to endless blue ocean waters, and then to scorched red deserts. In their special container, there were now 6 artifacts. The Gromavitsia, the Eye of the Eternal Storm, the Blade of the Phantom Forest, the Ring of Mists, the Hourglass of Eternity, and the Icy Heart. Each pulsed with its own unique energy, creating a powerful, though invisible, energy field that radiated a sense of ancient power. Lina ran her fingers over the amulet on her neck, feeling its warm, steady beat. which merged with the beating of her own heart. Tara's looked at the red landscape stretching beneath them. His face, though tired, expressed immense resolve. The knowledge of the anthropic vacuum and its desire to return the universe to non-existence was a heavy burden, but faith in the harmony of creation gave them strength. They knew that Uluru, this massive red rock rising from the desert, was not just a place of power, but the last energy node in their ancestors' network. Here, according to prophecy, awaited the dust of Uluru, the last artifact, destined to complete the set and prepare them for the final ritual in the Amazon. Their arrival in Australia was a meeting with a unique, primordial world. The heat was relentless, the air dry, and the landscape striking in its harsh beauty. They rented an all-terrain vehicle and set off deep into the desert, where the majestic Uluru rock awaited. The icy heart in Lina's backpack pulsed faintly, its blue glow contrasting with the red sand. Lina felt the artifact's energy resonating with Uluru's energy, creating a strange, powerful connection. This place, known as a sacred Aboriginal land, was imbued with ancient spirits and myths. They knew their journey would not be a simple stroll. As they approached Uluru, they felt a growing tension. The rock, rising above the desert, seemed alive, its surface shimmering from the heat and its shadows long and ominous. There was not a single living soul around it, only a silence that was more oppressive than the bustle of any city. The amulets around their necks began to pulse stronger, radiating cold, as if warning of the proximity of a powerful but dangerous force. Prophecy spoke of sand demons guarding the dust of Uluru and of the entity attacking. They waited until sunset, when Uluru glowed in the last rays, its color changing from orange to deep crimson. The night air was cold, but the sand still radiated the day's heat. Guided by the icy heart, which now glowed with a bright blue light, they moved towards the base of the rock. The artifact pointed to a small, barely visible opening hidden behind a pile of stones and sand, which was undoubtedly not part of modern archaeological excavations. The air at the entrance was cold, despite the daytime heat. This was not just an entrance to a natural formation, but a portal to a place where ancient spirits and the primordial energy of the earth intertwined with chaos. Upon entering, they found themselves in a narrow, spiral tunnel. The air was dry and heavy, saturated with the smell of antiquity and minerals. The icy heart in Lina's hand continued to glow, casting strange, shimmering shadows on the walls, which were covered with ancient Aboriginal paintings, intricate patterns resembling snakes, animals, and abstract forms. The tunnel led them deeper, and soon they heard a low, drawn-out hum emanating from deep within the rock. It was the buzzing of countless insects, but with a strange, ominous rhythm. Tara's immediately felt his amulet begin to heat up, as if warning of an extremely powerful threat. The narrow spiral tunnel in the depths of Uluru led Tara's and Lina to their final trial. The air was dry and heavy, saturated with the smell of antiquity and minerals. The icy heart in Lina's hand continued to glow blue, casting strange, shimmering shadows on the walls covered with ancient Aboriginal paintings. From the depths of the tunnel came a low, drawn-out hum that grew louder with each step, turning into a deafening buzzing. This was the buzzing of countless sand demons, warned of by prophecy. Tara's, his amulet pulsing hotly, felt an extremely powerful threat emanating from the darkness. Suddenly, the tunnel widened, opening into a vast, natural cave, illuminated by a dim crimson light emanating from cracks in the rocks. In the center of the cave, a huge stone altar, carved from red Uluru rock, loomed. Upon it, enveloped in a thin veil of smoke, lay the last artifact, the dust of Uluru. It resembled fine, shimmering sand, radiating a strange, primordial warmth. But the cave was not empty. Thousands of sand demons, bizarre, amorphous creatures, forged from sand and shadows, filled the space, their eyes burning red. Above them, in the center of the cave, a colossal, pulsating mass of darkness coiled, a manifestation of the entity itself, the Anthropic Vacuum, waiting for them. "This is it," Lina whispered, her voice barely audible, filled with awe and horror. She felt her mind struggling against the growing pressure of the Anthropic Vacuum, which tried to engulf her consciousness, instilling a sense of futility in their struggle. The sand demons rushed towards them, their bodies fast like sand whirlwinds, trying to bury Tara's and Lina under an avalanche of sharp grains. Tara's drew the blade of the phantom forest. Its dark gleam cut through the demons, slicing them into wisps of smoke, but they reappeared immediately, as if born from the rock itself. Lina, holding the icy heart, which emitted a blue glow, desperately tried to reach the altar. She knew that the dust of Uluru was supposed to complete the set of artifacts and prepare them for the final ritual. But how to activate it? Prophecy gave no clear instructions regarding this artifact, only hinted at the harmony of creation. She felt the Anthropic Vacuum trying to break her, showing illusions of their failure, of the world returning to non-existence. This was their most difficult battle, not just physical but mental. Terrace fought back with the blade, his strength draining. The sand demons were everywhere, their sandy bodies heavy, and their claws leaving burning marks. The colossal shadow of the Anthropic Vacuum began to expand, filling the cave, and Terrace felt the cold of non-existence penetrate his bones. "We can't defeat it, Lina," he cried, his voice filled with despair. But at that moment he saw Lina fall to her knees near the altar, her gaze fixed on the dust of Uluru. She intuitively understood that the dust of Uluru did not require blood, but absorbed it. It was a accumulator, the final piece that united all forces. She took all 5 acquired artifacts, the Gromovitsia, the Eye of the Eternal Storm, the Blade of the Phantom Forest, the Ring of Mists, the Hourglass of Eternity, and placed them on the altar around the dust of Uluru. Each artifact flared with its own color, and then all their glows merged, creating a rainbow, blinding beam of light that struck the dust. The dust of Uluru began to absorb this light, shimmering, and suddenly it erupted in a burst of energy that scattered the sand demons like dust. The colossal shadow of the Anthropic Vacuum wailed. The sound was so piercing that the rock trembled.
If you're still here, it means the shadows didn't scare you away. Subscribe to Darkroom Narratives for more stories that linger long after the lights go out.